Thank you all for coming. It's my duty and honour to welcome you all here, especially those that have travelled either interstate or internationally. It's great that you could all be here. Today's lunch is being hosted by the Comms Council in conjunction with the Ward, as you all know. And for those that don't know me, my name's Tony Hale. I'm the new CEO of the Comms Council, having been in the chair for a couple of months. Although I haven't been there for long, it doesn't take long to realise that it's going to be a pretty busy and exciting year. And to share just a few brief highlights with you, we are, as many of you would know, in the final stages of developing the IPA Professional Development Program. And in a few months, 5 online and 3 experiential courses are going to be launched around Australia or accessible around Australia. The Comms Council significantly is the first organisation in the world to join forces with the IPA and deliver those courses locally. So I think it's going to be very exciting in raising industry standards. In the meantime, ad school courses are being renewed and still remain in high demand throughout the country, and that's going to be a very interesting complementary set of courses there, notwithstanding we also have a Ward School which has just been filled and the graduate program which has had another successful year. Anthony Friedman, is Anthony here today? I'm not sure. Anthony Friedman has taken on the chairmanship of the EFIs after a long and successful term by Matt Melchiorish, and I know you've all been, or many of you have been involved in that. And we're looking to use the EFIs as a mechanism to build a stronger culture of effectiveness throughout the industry. We've got a new committee, and this year sees the launch of the Effective Advertiser of the Year, where to win, they must demonstrate that they've built a culture of effectiveness throughout their organisation and how that impacts on the results of the business or the brand. The AANA, of course, continue to be a very valuable partner with us on that program. But in an era where topics such as digital, data, mobile, content generation, social engagement, you've heard them all, where they continue to dominate, it's really important that we don't lose sight of the fundamentals of the business. And specifically, we must not lose sight of that advertising is an ability to drive demand and grow businesses. And successful advertising is driven by the simplicity of original creative ideas. Creativity is still, as we know it, is one of the most powerful tools that we have in the commercial and social world. And on any measure, in Australia, we're the best that there is in the world. So to understand more about this, the Communications Council is in the process of finalising an agreement with Deloitte Access Economics to quantify the role that advertising has in driving the economy, both from a commercial and a social perspective. While it's very early days now, we think that it's a really important innovation and something that we plan to release later this year. But today is about recognising our very best creative. We've got a full house here today and about 600 attending the awards tonight. Obviously, the attraction of our Chairman of Judges, Dan Wieden, has made a significant impact. So thank you, Dan, for coming. The Chairman of the Communications Council, Sudeep Gohill, will be Master of Ceremonies today. Wisely, he's decided to allow you to eat a meal and drink some wine before we start the formalities, which we plan around about 1 o'clock. So in the meantime, enjoy yourself and the camaraderie provided by this wonderful industry. Thank you.
Excellent, very quiet. Okay, I'm Sudeep. I'm the Chairman of the Comms Council and the CEO of Droga 5. Ironically, the person I'm about to introduce needs very little introduction. Like me, he probably inspired many of you to get into advertising, having written the line, "Just do it," and countless other pieces of iconic advertising. Over dinner last night, Dan and I worked out that I've known him for 12 years, over which time I've considered him to be a friend, a mentor, and sometimes a boss. Dan grew up in Portland and started in PR, so there's hope for all of us. He became a copywriter and moved into advertising quickly after that. And then in the local agency he was working at, he met a guy called Wieden+Kennedy, and between the two of them, they scraped $500 each together, so $1,000. And they started an agency on April Fool's Day called Wieden+Kennedy in 1982. Their first piece of business was a little upstart sneaker company called Nike, and their first client was a guy called Phil Knight, and he famously told them in, I think, their first meeting, but Dan can probably clarify, that he didn't believe in advertising. Anyway, 30 years later, the agency now has offices in Portland, New York, Amsterdam, Delhi, Shanghai, Tokyo, Sao Paulo, and has over 1,200 employees. Dan's motivation's always been to create a different kind of agency, a different kind of advertising agency, a place where people, as Dan would often say, could come to do the best work of their lives. And since its inception, Dan's thrown out the structure and bureaucracy that plagues many big agencies, and to be fair, many small agencies, in favor of the chaos theory that puts the work first, genuinely puts the work first, and empowers anyone to come to the table with a great idea. As we sit here today, the agency has an enviable client roster across the world, including Coca-Cola, Chrysler, Delta Airlines, ESPN, Heineken, Honda, Nike, Old Spice, Facebook, I could keep going, and billings of over $4.1 billion worldwide. I converted it to Australian dollars. The number that Dan gave me was US. Dan is, without a doubt, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. And in my book, and hopefully you'll agree at the end of his little speech, he proves you don't have to be an arsehole to run a multi-billion-dollar advertising agency. So without further ado, Dan Wieden.
There's too many people here. Well, there's a lot of people here. It's nice to join you today. When Sudeep called me back, oh Jesus, it was some time ago, a year and a half ago or something like that, wanted to know if I'd come and talk to you folks, and I love Australia, and I said, yeah, sure, that sounds interesting. I mean, why not? It surf's up, sun's out. It's a place where Australians live. Australians, you know Australians, they're the coolest people on the fucked up planet. So yeah, I'm here to talk. I don't know about what, but I'm here, and I gave it a good think. Like, what can I say to these people that I admire so much, whose work I've admired for decades? What can I say that isn't complete bullshit? And I can say this, and with deep respect, you and I can do better. I believe my work and your work are both getting a little too familiar. It's good, it's solid. Don't get me wrong, I'm making money, you're making money. But is this the best you and I can do? Seriously, you think? Are we living up to what we asked of ourselves back in the day? Can we blame it on our clients? Well, of course we can. You can blame it on the digital earthquake that's shaken marketing to the core. And we'll be left crying all night, what has happened to digital? What has it done to storytelling? I don't sleep so well. But I believe the problem we face is some sense of entitlement. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that you guys and my guys, we were the shit. I mean, we rocketed. Year after year, we shook the money tree, didn't we? Those were the days. Unfortunately, we got in a groove. We developed a sensibility that was so fresh, so much fun, and so precious in a weird way. And we learned how to reboot variations of it over and over again, year after year. We treated this work as if it was some sort of fine crystal. We put it in our trophy cases, added more the same year after year. So I've been thinking about this before I came down here, and you know what I think? I think maybe it's time to break a little crystal. You can do this at home or in your office. Now, if you and I decided this week to jump off a cliff together, I think that'd be a really fine idea. Suppose you and I upped and left the warm quarters of our present agencies with all that knowledge and security, all that process and predictability, and you guys and myself set out to rethink absolutely everything about this business. What's working, what's not working, and why. Is that possible? Are we so stuck in what we're doing we can't really re-examine the bullshit that's going on? Or even better, let's flush everything and recapture the power of beginner's mind. Part of the problem these days is we know too much. I believe that. The only reason Wieden+Kennedy has survived for 33 years is due to a lack of unadulterated ignorance and a phenomenal streak of good luck. That's not a joke, that's the reality. That and a thirst for making things up and finding shit out, and reviving the client after we've showed her the work. But I admit it, it doesn't seem we are all that unsure anymore. If there are guidelines in the system, and if they've proven themselves over and over again, time after time, why would any of us deviate? Saves time, saves money, saves client heartburn. Yeah, nobody wants to fail. Nobody. Yeah, but it's worth a shot. Big-time failure saved our ass when Wieden+Kennedy was like 2 years old. It was 1984, and the Olympic Games were in Los Angeles, and Nike, our only client, had a big breakout and spent serious money for the very first time. But they didn't give it to us. They gave it to somebody that knew what they were doing. They gave it to Chiat Day, and Chiat Day did some phenomenal goddamn work, and we were devastated. We were in our last days. We knew we were. The game was clearly up. Some months later, we got a call from this guy, an anonymous guy, but he had heard something about Honda scooters down in California, and they were looking for an agency, and they were reviewing some, but they were about to close, and this guy suggested you send the work down there. So we did, and it was really a successful thing. So they hired us, and we came up with this. I don't know if any of you know Jim Riswold, but he's sort of been one of our most amazing creative people. And he came up with this spot for Lou Reed, and we spent an entirety in New York trying to pull off this shoot. But when we saw the dailies, we were absolutely speechless, and not in a good way. It was an epic disaster, epic. Yelling match ensued, director marches off, clients frozen in place. Kennedy and I were certain this time the game really is up. We were toast, but we gathered up the dailies and went and saw Larry Bridges, an amazing editor, and he could not believe what he saw either. And he ushered us out and said, why don't you come back in 4 hours? I think I may have an idea. So Larry literally saved our ass. This agency wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the editor. Instead of looking for beautiful film, he decided it's fucked up and we just need to embrace it. And so he took all the copy out of it except the last line, and turned it into an underground sort of film. And I'll show you the spot. It's 1985.
Hey, don't settle for walk.
That was 30 years ago. 30 years ago. And if you were there then, people would stop in the airports, you know, and the thing would come on television. Everybody just stopped and watched this goddamn thing. Didn't make, I mean, it was just mesmerizing. And sales went through the roof. And Nike parted with Chiat and came back. And speaking of miracles, who in their right mind would ever take up an unpredictable, wild-ass agency like Wieden+Kennedy and match them up with a very, 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 very conservative company and very thoughtful company called Procter & Gamble? Well, that relationship happened behind my back. And I was shocked and not amused. And I told everyone, this makes no sense whatsoever. I don't care about the goddamn money. I know they've got a lot of money. They've also going to cause a lot of headaches. And there's no way we're going to save a dying brand like Old Spice. It's a dead brand, trust me.
Hello, ladies. Look at your man. Now back to me. Now back at your man. Now back to me. Sadly, he isn't me. But if he stopped using lady-scented body wash and switched to Old Spice, he could smell like he's me. Look down. Back up. Where are you? You're on a boat with the man your man could smell like. What's in your hand? Back at me. I am. It's an oyster with 2 tickets to that thing you love. Look again. The tickets are now diamonds. Anything is possible when your man smells like Old Spice and not a lady. I'm on a horse.
This... I'm humbled by this spot every time I see it, but it blew up big time. Folks on Twitter went absolutely nuts, and we answered 110 of those tweets by scripting, filming, and posting a personal reply, one every 10 minutes. And this Old Spice brand, assumingly dead, arose from the grave and swiftly knocked the category leader Axe out. So you just never know. And I never ever thought I would fall in love with Procter & Gamble. I feel kind of embarrassed about it, but I'm absolutely certain they didn't expect to fall in love with us either, because it was a kind of a crazy outfit and a different kind of marketing proposition. But we were both wrong. You know, I've been in this business like 33 years. That's the lifespan of Jesus Christ, isn't it? Come to think of it. I think he did a better job than I'm doing right now. And it's fucking difficult to keep a creative organization creative. It's easiest in the early days. There's so much optimism, so little bureaucratic nonsense, and not much infighting, just a real sense of daring and a deep desire to shock the world. However, it can all go very bad very quickly. We've been lucky, but we also did a few weird things that may have made a difference, and I'm happy to share. First of all, organization. Organization, not my skill set. I have trouble organizing my sock drawer, so I don't. Kennedy was an art director. I was a writer. When we signed a lease in our first office space, which was in the basement of an old labor temple, the guy running it said we had to decide who was president and who was vice president. No, we said that that would ruin everything. And we looked at each other and refused to sign. In the end, Kennedy insisted, okay, be president. And I signed and immediately felt like I'd eaten the forbidden apple. We both have authority issues, which led to a very unique leadership model. And I don't know, maybe you guys have heard about this, but we decided as two creative guys that we need to organize around a trio. There's like two creative people and one person, man or woman, with a left-handed brain, you know, because we're not all that rational. And the assumption being most of the time the creative people don't pay attention to anything anyway, and unless it's a creative issue. But if there's a major disagreement, then the creative people can outvote the person with some logic. And I would even go to maybe 4 with 3 creatives and 1 guy. This threesome applies to each client leadership team, to each office leadership team, and to the global team. Now, a friend of mine was having dinner a while back with this guy who wrote a book, and he's studied leadership for years and years and years, written many, many books about it. And my friend asked him if he'd ever heard of management in threes. And this old man just sat and looked for a while, and he said, yeah, it was the Romans. It was the last time the Romans did anything like this, I guess. But apparently Caesar was not really a great guy. They got rid of him. They set up 2 people, had civil war, came up 3, and it was like a stool. They had some stability, and it worked out just fine. So you might consider that if you're talking about starting a new agency or getting rid of the one you're in. But perhaps the most important thing we've done in those very early days, most important thing was to realize the importance of culture. We were turning out pretty cool work for Nike and ESPN in those early days, but it wasn't long before the holding companies would come in and take our folks because they had just laid tons of money on them. And we couldn't match those salaries. And every day it seemed we tried to find some way to hold on to these fantastic people that we'd been nurturing. And then it hit us, we'll never match those salaries. But fuck the money. We've got to create a culture that's so damn weird, so wild, and so sticky that will hurt your very soul if you leave this place. And that culture, if it's seen as our highest priority, and if it's nurtured properly, and if it just might create the environment that will not only retain our best people, but inspire them to do the best works of their life. That's the promise we made. The promise that we're going to do everything we can to keep. So I confess it's a tad more chaotic than most agencies. But what's not to love? Look, I have this addiction to chaos. I mainline chaos every morning. I kind of love it when I'm anxious. The older I get, the more I need what upsets me, what shocks me, what makes me squirm and gets me angry. The older I get, the more I value what forces me to take a second look, the more I respect people who don't automatically respect me. And honestly, I love this fucking agency the most when it's off balance. When we're like in a car moving 7,000 miles an hour, making a hard right-hand corner, and everybody's holding their breath, laughing like hell, vomiting occasionally, but smiling and leaning hard to the left to make sure we don't fucking tip over. That's to me is life force, you know? And something magic happens when it's out of control like that. Some of these beliefs are more mine than others in the agency, but they humor me. But to be honest now, don't you kind of love it? A little touch of chaos now and then? I mean, seriously, don't you? Let's see a raise of hands. Who love chaos? There you go. Feeder, feeder, feeder. It engages you. I think Chaos seems to me, it does this amazing thing that order can't do. It encourages you. It gets right in your face with its freakish breath and issues a challenge. It asks you stuff that order never will, and shows you stuff, all the weird shit that order tries to hide. Chaos is the only thing that honestly wants you to grow. The only friend who really helps you be creative, that demands that you be creative, so that you can make something that matters. And I kind of think that's what our job should be, don't you think? We're all going to make enough money to survive. We're going to make enough money to raise families. It'll all be okay. You don't have to have the biggest house. You don't have to do the wildest things that shows how successful you are. You just need to do something that matters. Now, clearly, there are some disciplines in this agency that don't really need chaos as their operating policy. Finance comes to mind. But perhaps the most important thing about chaos is that it will challenge authority. It cares more about the truth than power. I remember the first time U.S. Senator Bill Bradley dropped by the agency and spent some time in a couple of hours in our conference room, and he just wanted to talk with about a dozen strange people that work for us, and he wasn't there to lecture or press the flesh. He just wanted to participate in a conversation and see what the temperature was, and it was a fascinating meeting. It was very frank, wide-ranging, and when I was driving him back to the airport, he said, "What an amazing group of people, Wieden. I mean, so young, so bright, so well-informed, but I gotta tell you, what was most astonishing was the complete lack of deference to you, to me, to anybody." The senator wasn't complaining, really. He was just mesmerized by the informality, the absence of any real obvious authority. So time goes by. So now what happened when a wild young agency started to grow and balloon out of all expectation? Well, things have gotten a little different. In 1993, we sent troops first into Amsterdam and opened an office from Portland. Big decision. Secondly, we opened another one in New York, then another one in London, then in Tokyo, then in Shanghai, followed by Delhi, and most recently, Sao Paulo. It's weird. You wake up one morning and you're a network with some 1,500 people and billing in excess of $4 billion. But my God, scale changes everything. Process begins to sneak its way inside. Order becomes a comfort. Chaos is showing the door. It reminds me of this great story of God and the devil. And they're hanging out on the street one night and just sort of shooting the shit. And they both stop talking when this man comes out of the shadows, and he starts walking across the street, and then he stops for a minute and bends down and picks something up and looks at it and is like just transfixed, and then walks on across the street. And in a sense of absolute bliss. And God smiles and says to the devil, "See? Now that man discovered the truth." The devil took a pull on his cigarette and said, "Yeah, I'm going to help him organize it." It's the joke that isn't really a joke. That tension between God and the devil is what modern science would call a dissipative structure. A dissipative structure is something like a whirlpool that takes material in, makes order out of it, and then throws it out. Business organizations, like people, are essentially dissipative structures. They are more a process than they are a thing. As Buckminster Fuller entitled one of his books, "I seem to be a verb." Well, you are, too. In most people's mind, order is identified with equilibrium, not chaos. Order is seen as being set, balanced, predictable. We think we're helping ourselves when we organize the world this way. Fritzlaff Capra says, if you are trying to create a creative organization, you should forget everything static. Static is the last thing you want. In the new sense of complexity, we learned that non-equilibrium is a source of order. The turbulent flows of water and air, while appearing chaotic, are really highly organized. In living systems, the order arising from non-equilibrium is far more evident, being manifest in the richness, diversity, and beauty of life around us. Mr. Capra. For the most part, the business you and I are in are dissipative structures. And they will reach a threshold of stability where they will either break down or break through to a new state of order. Are you with me here? Is this too weird? Doesn't sound like advertising, does it? Right? Structures that reach this crisis point have several characteristics, including a hypersensitivity to small fluctuations in the environment. A tiny random fluctuation can push the choice of a path. That is why, during periods of extreme sensitivity, anything that happens inside an organization can prove to be momentous. Let me repeat. During periods of extreme sensitivity, anything that happens inside an organization can prove to be monumental. Well, I'm here to tell you that at Wieden+Kennedy, we are indeed at a period of extreme sensitivity. The digital revolution is redefining the way people engage with the world. It is changing the kind of talent we are bringing into our organization. It is changing what we make. It is bringing our own culture, its own culture, into ours, and it is momentous. These slight fluctuations are creating big ripples. The non-equilibrium will either transform us or render us inert. We will break down or we will break through. With that in mind, there's a quote from the late poet and teacher William Stafford I'd want to share with you, and it underlines what a subtle thing we're actually talking about here. William Stafford was an amazing poet and teacher, and I recall this quote, and I share it with you. I used to think, what can I say, what can I tell them that will make the term go right? And now I realize it wasn't what I was telling them. It was other things, how I came in. It was how long I gave them to respond to each thing, or myself. I was a total participant if I could be in what was happening. So here's what I say, and I say it to everyone here in this room, and I say it to everyone at Wieden+Kennedy. Let's shock the world once again. I mean, deep down, that's what the world really wants. It wants to be woken up, shaken, turned loose. It wants to feel young again, uncertain, and curious as hell. Thank you very much. Jesus Christ.
We're going to take questions from the audience. I should have mentioned that earlier. So if anyone has any questions for Dan, not for me, raise your hand. We've got some microphones, I believe, that are around the room. We can have a bit of a chat. Someone must have a question. Or not. Over here. Oh, hang on. You're getting a microphone.
Would you ever consider opening in Australia?
God, no. I'd love to have a place here where I could come and have an excuse to come, but 8 is enough, dude.
Paul? It's coming.
Hey Dan, Paul McIntyre. Love it because chaos is good, but I just wonder, everything you talk about, how do you reconcile it with where the corporate mindset is and with clients? Because it's great from mad people's perspective, but how does that resonate with companies that are listed and have got all sorts of processes? How do you manage your way through that stuff?
Well, I don't manage much of anything, really.
Navigate?
I mean, I just kept kicking myself upstairs until I finally got out of there.
Can I ask you a question, Dan? I've heard you tell this story a couple of times, and if it's not too tedious, I think everyone would love. Can you tell the story of how and when you wrote Just Do It?
Sure.
Well, okay. These guys haven't heard it before.
Okay. So that was a long time ago. And Nike was doing their first real television campaign. I think we did 5 spots, and I had 5 different teams working on a different slice of the Nike business. And they were great spots. They really, really were. Some of our best. The first time we really did fabulous work for Nike. And, but they were all so disjointed from one another. There was no commonality about it. So the night before we were supposed to go to the client, I just thought, maybe, and we always hated taglines. We thought it was just like some sort of ancient bullshit. And so I wrote down about 3 or 4 things. And then for some reason, in my mind, I thought of a guy named Gary Gilmore, who grew up in Portland and then started traveling around. He was kind of a badass guy. And he ended up shooting to death a young couple in Salt Lake City, which is not a good place to kill people because he was found guilty and sentenced to death by the firing squad. And why this is occurring to me, I couldn't understand. But they asked him if he had any final words before they put this hood over his head. And he said, yeah, let's do it. And I thought, how in the hell does somebody call it on like that, you know? I mean, if somebody can do that. So I just changed one word. And I became famous. How about that?
More questions?
Yeah, Anthony, what other agencies in the world at the moment do you really admire? When you're looking at them, you go, wow, that reminds me of Wieden+Kennedy at its very best.
So for those that couldn't hear the question, what other agencies does Dan admire that that he admires, basically, something like that?
Well, it's funny because I just admire good work. That's what I most admire. And I admire whoever produces it. I mean, there's some really big networks that do really good work. And I salute that work. But we just have this idealism thing going on, you know what I mean? And we love to be challenged with good work. I mean, if people stop doing great work, it hurt us. You know, we need that challenge. I think you need that challenge.
Hi, Dan. I'm quite inspired and interested with the fact that you've remained independent for so long, and there's clearly an independent spirit running through everything you do. Would you be able to elaborate on why you think that's really important for not only Wieden+Kennedy and your culture, but the industry and the way that the cycle works? Because you seem to keep a lot of the other guys on notice and be able to approach various projects and clients and just the way that you work with a degree of liberation and swagger in some cases.
Yeah, it's I just think what we need to be is we need to be a creative organization. We don't need to become a financial organization. I think that's the difference. Because if your first most important thing is money, then you'll run a typical business based upon the income numbers that come into the shop. If you are actually a creative organization, you're going to judge the creativity that is being put out. And we just voted to become a creative organization instead of a financial organization. And so money serves creativity rather than creativity servicing money. And I mean, in fact, I talked to Dave Luer earlier this year, and I said I was speaking in Cape Town. And by the way, this is probably the last time I'll ever address an audience. I'm too old to be talking to anybody anymore. But I asked Dave, I said, you know, we never talked about, as partners, what we did with the agency. And he said, yeah, no, go ahead and tell them. So I'll tell you guys. A couple of years ago, we decided, how are we going to make sure that nobody's going to sell this goddamn agency? So all the partners came together, and we decided we're going to take our stock and put it in a trust, and the executors of that trust have only one obligation: to make sure that it is absolutely impossible to sell this agency. We will die before we sell.
Hi, Dan. Could you tell us about Caldera?
Oh, God. How'd you find out about that?
Joe Staples.
Oh, I mean, I really like the agency. It's done really well by me. But Caldera is where my heart really belongs. And it happened to me about 20 years ago that I went, what is going on here? We take a bunch of white middle-class people and give them the ability to go and take the culture of the inner city and, through the work, sell that culture back to those people. But the people in the inner city don't even understand they have a chance to play this game. That just seemed fucked up. So I thought about it, and got my family together, and we decided we're gonna do something about this. So I bought some property up in the Cascades of Oregon, and with this amazing blue lake. It's like 350 feet deep. It's a huge volcano, basically, that blew up. And we brought in artists and naturalists and worked with kids from the inner city and from the Indian reservations out there in the small towns on the other side of the mountain, and just through bringing creativity into these kids' lives, when they have a sense of themselves and they have a voice, they've got a place in the world, you know? And these kids have been going, it's been 18 years now since this thing's been going on, and the kids are coming back after they graduate and work. Some of them drop work and come and help us run this program. And I have the biggest goddamn family you'd ever want to know.
Hello, I'm Mila. The stories of your creative work are so amazing and inspiring, so thank you so much for sharing them. But as a planner, I'd also love to hear about the value you see for strategy, or potentially not at all, within the agency.
The strategy for what?
Just strategy and planning in the creative process.
Oh yeah, we do that.
Any other questions? I think there was one over there somewhere. Oh no, here we go, Mark Harrick.
Dan, can you hear me? Dan, can you tell us about slime mold, please?
Slime mold. Oh shit, I gotta stand up for this one. So slime mold is the greatest thing. And I forgot how I found out about slime mold, but it's an actual thing that happens, a life form. And assume that you're all slime mold spores, okay? And you're spread out throughout this gigantic room, and it's pretty much dark except this one light that's shining on this man here. And he is the light. So somehow all these spores have to get to the light. So they exist at this place where you are both animal and vegetable. It's a very strange thing. You probably don't realize you are, but if you were a slime mold, you would be that juncture. So a little bit of both of those things. So what happens is, in slime mold, you would somehow start coming together, turning into one thing that's kind of like a inchworm that will inch its worm around and get to the light, turn into a plant, and throw off more spores. So what's so amazing about it is that there's no differentiation between one spore and another. And they've even done research on these and put a slime mold in a maze, and it will find its way through the light. Now, how the fuck does that happen? So you guys aren't working hard enough. That's
you talk a lot about Wieden+Kennedy being a creative organisation, and I just wondered if you could talk more about how to develop that culture, the creative. I mean, you've touched on a lot in your speech, but if there's anything else you could give us some advice on how to create and maintain a culture of creativity in an agency.
Yeah. Well, there's no formula for chaos, so that makes it a little more difficult. But I just, and when you walk into any of our offices, I don't know if this directly answers your question, but there's no awards. We would be humiliated if somebody put an award in one of our offices. But instead, you see a picture of every man and woman who works there, and each photograph is expressing themselves in some bizarre way. And that's sort of the promise we're making, is like, how do you tell a person that comes into the organization that their job is to explore all the nooks and crannies of their life and their powers and test everything. Fuck up. Fail harder is a big deal for us. We ask people, please fail harder and walk in stupid every morning. But this thing about helping people grow and develop, also then, so you're stuck with this really interesting riddle is, if you have that many strong individuals, how do you then come together in a way to solve problems? And the only way that can work is kind of like the slime mold, is that somebody has to have the idea that everybody goes, yeah, that. I had an idea, but no, that's even better. So when there's that search, not for self-grandizement, but for finding what is the biggest truth we can find, what is the biggest shock we can give to this system. Does that make any sense to you? Yeah. Is that enough?
Any more questions? Oh.
So a couple of years ago, when I was getting into the industry, I read that book about you guys, where cultures.
Yeah.
Subaru, and you said at the start something about the importance of culture and just not working with people you don't necessarily want to. So how do you guys address that when you know what's at stake when it comes to people's livelihoods or people that you know and there's a certain account? You may be big enough now to just absorb that, but throughout your growth, at times was there any time where you actually went, okay, let's try and make this account work with the people that we have, as opposed to just walking away because you realise that the cultures and the objectives aren't necessarily in sync?
Well, it's a good thing. I'm glad you brought it up because this last year we had to fire a couple of clients, and the reason you fire them is basically because they can't let us do good work. You know what I mean? And the people that work on the account are so frustrated they can't spit. So you keep turning new people in, and it still doesn't work. And you can't hold on to that. I mean, they can be paying you zillions of dollars, but the fact of the matter is they're going to screw up the culture. And people are going to be, I mean, you're going to take away the very thing that means the most to this agency. So you're right. We had to turn around and lay off 40 people. And what was really interesting to me was because we never take away the ability to send an all-agency email out when they're leaving. And to a man and to a woman, they were all very complimentary. You know, it was like, wow, I hate to go, but it's been a thrill. I've learned a lot, was sort of the basic line. One young kid said, well, I guess it's my turn, but I want to thank everybody for making me a better person. I mean, and plus, I mean, you don't really, young people in this business anymore, they're not looking for, I'm going to stay with this goddamn agency forever. You know what I mean? That might be a stupid thing. Maybe you ought to circle around and try other places out and make sure you know where you belong. Or maybe you start your own thing. So I think you have to have that kind of dynamic. If you have a plan of like, we're going to hold on to everybody, well, we had one young gal, Evelyn, I think she left us three times or 4 times, you know, and kept coming back. We said, yeah, come on. So it's just that sort of open environment and that sense of what will happen will happen.
One last question over here.
You talk about doing things that matter. What does that mean? How do you make that decision? Is that personal? Is that broader?
When I talk about things that matter, I mean like work that comes up and changes people's mind, changes their behavior, and sort of lights a new way of doing something. You know what I mean? So you go, oh God, I never thought of doing that. And it's just that. It's like how do you evolve and keep changing all the time, you know? I mean, it is not a stable environment. And so you have to keep pushing and being stupid every morning because something happened last night that you don't know about. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Dan, who's come all the way from Portland, Oregon. He'll be at award this evening as well. And a final thank you to Joe and Jen and Tony and all the guys from the Comms Council and everyone else that's helped kind of make this event actually happen. Enjoy your dessert and coffee and all the rest of it. And thanks very much. See you this evening. Cheers.